Radio Arson, une série de podcasts proposée par la bibliothèque de la Villa Arson.
Invited by Gauthier Tassart Arnaud Maguet, Sandi Denton Ian Svenonius are at the Villa Arson for a mini writing residency for their new project, a musical comedy. They together form the duo Escape-ism, based in Los Angeles, one of the many musical projects of Ian Svenonius. Sandi and Ian are at the Radio Arson's microphone today, here to play a little game with us, Proust questionnaire, revisited for a rock band. Welcome to Radio Arson, Ian and Sandi. Sandi and Ian.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us here. It's an honor.
Hi, thank you.
Today it's like a fun interview, so I have some questions for you. First question, what do you appreciate most about the French public?
The French public? I mean, the rock and roll audience is, they have some sense of, I don't know, they appreciate style. Historically, they always responded to black hair, the poet Mandil, pointy shoes, leather jacket, a particular classic aesthetic, a little bit camp. France has traditionally been the place that really appreciated Alan Vega, Johnny Thunders, the Cramps, bands like this.
And jazz, and the blues.
Yeah, jazz and the blues. You know, it's a home of, surrealism, existentialism. Historically there's been a kind of, appreciation, a sensibility for the...
You came today with a book about Duchamp, Dada.
Oh, I just picked this up. It's from your library. Yeah. I just picked it up on the way. And I thought we could look at it to get inspiration for the...
And your inspiration comes mostly from this kind of movement?
I would say we pull from a lot of different resources, but a lot of them happen to be very French, I think. Also political movements. Back to the question, the French, they've always been willing to protest authority and stand up for their beliefs and value systems, and that's something that we think is really cool. Every time we go to Paris, there's a protest.
I've definitely been, I've always been influenced by the modernist art movements, like the futurism and this kind of thing. These kind of very, art movements that are incoherent, but also have a kind of intention, and
manifesto.
And that's, it's that an idea of the subculture. This idea, modernism, is now kind of, it's predicated on the idea of, an art that can say the unsayable, the unspeakable, and that's based on a kind of subculture that's outside of kind of the mainstream or the regular society, but it's kind of it's an idea that's almost extinct now, and I think with the digital paradigm, we see the end of modernism, and because it's very difficult to create a subculture, like something that's not part of broad society, because everybody, with the digital thing, there's very little chance for things to develop underground to develop. And that's why escapism proposes a beneath the underground, something underneath the underground. We see the old underground has been, It's been co-opted. It's been invaded, occupied by square forces. And now we propose a beneath the underground.
Hugo Mandil from the Pearly Gates, who is with us, an art student from last year. He was in DNSEP, now he's living his own life, a rock and roll life. Maybe he has some question about the beneath the underground question, maybe?
What is your main inspirations in music history? What period of time?
Well, that's a fun question because there's definitely the obvious answers. You know, we love rock and roll. You know, we love the Velvets and whatnot, but I think we find most of our inspiration maybe before that. It's like 50s rockabilly. You know, 60s, obviously we love. We listen to a lot of country music because we live in California. And we drive through the desert a lot, which is where the cowboys used to roam. So, you know, I think there's a lot of maybe more lesser realized inspirations in the music than...
Yeah, we like, gospel, early rock and roll, country music.
Yeah.
Anything that's very simple and very raw. And we're kind of less interested in big production. We like things that are more gestural. This idea of rock and roll is an ancient technology. It's like it's kind of, what is it? It's like, it's anything. It's the art for people who have nothing. You have no access to, you don't have a big contract with a big company or that you're not part of the entertainment industry, but you can just make this thing. All you need for rock and roll is just, that's all you need.
I heard a great story about Dolly Parton, how she wrote, I think was it Two Doors Down? It was one of her big hits, but she just got the idea in her trailer, and she has those long nails, and she just used her nails as like an instrument, like a percussive instrument, and wrote, one of her big hits, just her voice and her nails, And so I think, she's obviously a country star, but I do think that it sort of goes to the ethos of rock and roll, and just being able to, a good song's a good song, it'll sound good with nothing or with a big production or, so.
Yeah, and, rock and roll has always just been this idea, the idea of the idea of amateurism, the idea of the amateur. It's the same idea as Dada and this modernist art, which is like, it's against technique. It's not against technique, because there's technique, but it's against the idea of virtuosity, or the idea of, you don't need a certificate from an institute to play rock and roll. And that's why rock and roll has always been the democratic art form, as opposed to film, which requires all this capital, as opposed to art, which typically it needs a gallery or some sponsor. Rock and roll is something, you can create from the very bottom. And now it's more difficult because the festivals, they kind of resemble the galleries. They resemble these kind of authorities and these critical economic forces, corporate forces are kind of trying to control the expression. But ultimately, you can still make rock and roll. You can still find an audience without those things. That's why traditionally rock and roll has always been apart from the other arts. It gets very little respect. Gets no respect because it's a democratic art form.
Let's go on the Proust questionnaire. What is the greatest misfortune for a guitarist?
Well, I think the guitarist sort of has the most difficult job in the classic rock band setup, because the job of the rhythm section is essentially to, you hold it down and you have to be in time and you have to be funky, and it's kind of the cool job. But the guitarist, it's a more, extroverted position, and it's really tonally bright and sharp, and it cuts through. And so it's very audible for that reason. And I think it's really easy to play bad guitar, if you're the lead guitar player. So, really the job of the guitar player is to have really good taste, to know when not to play. And it's
the worst thing that can happen to a guitar player is for them to learn how to play too well.
That's a good
or to
answer.
get too many pedals, because then they're just lost in this thing. They've got to keep it simple.
Yeah.
They've got to think of they can't compete with the singer too much. They can't collide too much. Yeah, and so it's like Sandi said. On one hand, it's this extroverted position, but on the other hand, the function of playing guitar is actually introverted, because they typically have to look down, so you can't make the eye contact with the audience. So the worst thing to happen to a guitar player is maybe to get too good and to become too introverted, because then you're not connecting. And rock and roll is really communication. Really, you're communicating. You need to communicate. The bass player, the drummer, and the singer can all look at the audience. The guitar player is often looking down, and then suddenly they're not playing with the people. They're not with the people. I would say, yeah. I mean, it's like Sandi said. It's this extroverted thing, but then there's also this introversion, and that's the paradox for the guitar player.
Another funny question. In your experience, what is a bass player's favorite activity?
Well, bass players are not like guitar players. They're like, somebody's personality is completely determined by the role that they play in the band. So a drummer who becomes, let's say somebody starts as a drummer and then they switch instruments and they become a guitar player, then their personality is going to change completely. So the bass player is typically, this isn't always the case, but typically the bass player is chosen to be in the band because of their personality or their style, or essentially their appearance. Because a lot of people can play bass. Bass is the least. It's not that everybody can play bass well. Sandi's actually a very good bass player, but a lot of people can just fake it. So a lot of times somebody like a bass player, a good example of one is Paul Simonon from The Clash. And he's kind of the consummate, or he's the paradigm bass player or something. Or
For you?
No, I mean just me. I just mean he's like, if you took a bass player archetype, it's Paul Simonon, because he's stylish, good looking, kind of a mascot, almost a mascot for the group. So a bass player is often the mascot for the group. So they just like clothes. That's what they like to do. They like to buy clothes.
I love shopping, so I think this theory it must be true.
Yeah, they're into style.
I do think there's something to it. I think that the bass player, I was attracted to the instrument, certainly. I do think it's the most stylish. I actually love playing drums. It's my fantasy to be a drummer, but I would never want to actually be the drummer, because I wouldn't be happy having to, load all of the drums and set it up every night, and then to have to sit in the back. I like the bass player. You get to be up front. You get to show off your outfit.
So the drummer, so the drummer's personality is shaped by the fact that they're not being looked at. So they're really upset about this, and that they're also very important for the group. There's this saying, the maxim in a rock and roll group is, you're only as good as your drummer, because the drummer is kind of driving. The drummer drives, but they get very little glory typically. Typically they're sort of, or they feel that they're not given the glory, and they're trapped. They're trapped. The drums in English, they're also called traps. The traps, the trap set. You're trapped. You're trapped behind this thing. Everybody else can kind of move around a little, and you're just trapped back there. So there's a lot of seething resentment. There's a lot of resentment with the drummer, and it comes out in various ways. Keith Moon is a good example.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And you, Sandi, what are your... If there's a long list of women playing bass in rock, like in the Pixies or in Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah.
It's my culture because I was young during the 90s, so I saw that on MTV, you know. Maybe you saw the same icons on the TV? Or...
Yeah, well, there really weren't that many female bass players when I got started. Because now there are much more. But at the time, yeah, it was just, there was Kim Gordon, there was Kim Deal. Carol Kay was my sort of personal hero, or, you know, I could really, when I found out that, you know, the person who wrote all of those bass lines and all those, you know, songs that I grew up hearing, you know, in the Beach Boys, you know, I found out that it was a woman, and I was just thought that was so cool. But yeah, there weren't very many. I should definitely give a shout out to my friend Paz, who actually filled in for Kim Deal replaced Kim Deal after she left the Pixies. But she was in this band called Entrance Band, and I remember seeing them play, and I saw her, and that was very inspiring for me. Yeah, it's definitely a sexy position for a band. Yeah. That's why I thought it was sexy.
You can keep your composure.
That's why I wanted to do it. Yeah.
You keep your composure more.
Yeah.
Would you be able to find even one quality in a rock band manager? If so, which one?
I think managers in the classic era of rock and roll were, they were very, a lot of them were very creative, and they kind of conceptualized much of what we know as, a lot of them are concepts about rock and roll, especially in the 60s, early 60s period, because, there's a lot of, especially English rock and roll, which was essentially controlled by this kind of gay management. There was a kind of gay management mafia who were very conceptual. They were art people, and they were very conceptual, and they had a lot of great ideas. So they would, a lot of the groups in the early rock and roll era were just these kids who were playing music and who looked really great, and then they had this management who would kind of dress them up and think of the marketing. And so like the Rolling Stones, Beatles, Yardbirds, they all had this, the Bee Gees, they all had these gay managers who were into theater and art and very smart. And that's why the groups kind of, The Who had gay theater management. And and that's why the music got so conceptual, or that's part of the reason the music got so overtly conceptual. Now management is just these it's bullshit, I mean, we don't have a manager. We don't need a manager because we are the conceptualists. Yeah. We're the artistic. we don't need somebody. We're not 18-year-old English kids. So,
True.
Yeah, but you can't just management. Also, the Monks, the American band who lived in Germany, the Monks, they had a manager who conceived, he conceptualized their whole thing. So I think, management can be cool. But now managers, they're just these kind of people who, whatever. So part of this horrible corporate rock and roll situation that we have that's really destroying the music. It's destroying everything. It's kind of the opposite. Management now is a conservatizing. It's a conservatizing thing, don't say that. Oh, you got to be corporate, everything's very corporate.
It's very safe.
Yeah, or like play it safe, don't have an opinion, don't have a personality. Now a rock and roll band is rewarded for being innocuous, for having no personality. That's the ultimate rock and roll, like the best thing you could do for your career. In the 60s or in the 50s, it was the opposite. You had to be outrageous, provocative, say crazy stuff. It's like, and do crazy stuff, So it's the art form is almost the reverse of what it was.
Yeah.
That's why we have total contempt for the modern rock and roll scene. That's why we're completely apart from it, and we despise it. We ignore it. We're not part of it.
Yeah, it reminds me of the manager of the Sex Pistols too. He has
Malcolm McLaren.
He has the idea.
The Sex Pistols were just models for his shop. He got the Sex Pistols to model his clothes or him and Vivian Westwood's clothes. And then he had read The Situationists and he knew about the stuff. And then he's the one who, some of the groups were conceptualists themselves. Oh, Bernie Rhodes for the Clash, same thing. He was the idea guy.
But in the Clash, there's a lot of personalities, so it's less clear, no?
Yeah. But same with Johnny Rotten. You could say Johnny Rotten was he has
the je ne sais quoi.
Well, he was anti-authoritarian and perverse. He was perverse too.
Yeah.
But he didn't have the situation. He had the kind of the graphics and the campaign, the
he had
marketing.
Attitude.
But he had attitude.
Yeah.
That's the thing. These people have attitude. Like Pete Townsend, he's a smart, conceptual person. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just the manager, but the managers are the ones who steered them that way and kind of let the world know. Mm-hmm. They let the world know. Same with the Ramones. The Ramones had a manager who told them to dress like gay hustlers. That was the whole thing. It was like, dress like a gay hustler, because back then there was this hustler look, the leather jacket with the white t-shirt and the tight pants, tight jeans. And, so he kind of took the Stooges look and mixed it with this gay hustler look. And that was a manager's concept, because before that they were like glam kids.
It definitely used to be more, the manager role is definitely maybe used to be what we now know as maybe more of a producer's role, but now we're living in this sort of era where, it's cool because bands and artists just have more autonomy. They're sort of doing everything themselves, and in some ways it's really great. And then in other ways, maybe it would be nice to, have more of a team or,
Yeah, well, back then a group was more like a restaurant, it was an asset that you owned. So the manager would buy the band, so when, like for example, the Rolling Stones were sold from Andrew Lou Goldham to Alan Klein for a Rolls Royce. That's a famous story. Like he sold the band. And so the bands were assets. They were essentially like commodities that were being, traded.
Because we're talking about all these punk bands who had these managers who, had a lot of control over the trajectory of the band. And it's interesting because the whole punk, ethos or ideology is this sort of like DIY thing, this punk attitude and, kind of taking things into your own hands. And maybe that's sort of second wave punk. But it's interesting that, the first wave punk rockers are actually these sort of like highly, managed or manicured sort of bands. And, but then now in some ways is a lot more punk rock because you have all of these musicians and artists who are literally doing everything themselves. They're managing, they're writing, they're doing their own, whatever aesthetics, their production, their graphics. Stage, their graphics, their social media. Way more is expected of an artist.
But that's also because of this, modern, that's also a function of economy because nobody has any money there's no money, so everything, and this is kind of the brainwashing from the ruling elite, which is like, oh, you can do it, like this paradigm with the computers is like, you can do it all yourself. It's like, no, you have to do it all yourself, because nobody can hire, the economy doesn't allow this kind of team unless you really, unless you...
At least not in America.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe it's different in France, but for us, our economy is very acute,
It's very difficult to be a musician in America.
I mean, we're not crying about it. We're not crying, but they don't make it easy.
Oh, they don't make it easy.
Yeah, let's talk about your book in any way. We have it in the library. Yeah.
Oh, which one?
Yeah, how to make a rock and roll band.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have 4 books.
Yeah, but this in French, translated in French, one, no?
Oh, yeah.
You have written 4 books, so, and now you're writing something quite original.
Yeah, we're co-writing a play while we're here.
A musical. Which will feature...
It's an Escape-ism musical.
Yeah, songs by the band. An original screenplay by Ian.
It's like a Chris Christopherson with Stars Born, but it's an original. It's original. It's going to be better. Better than... we like Chris Christopherson, but this is...
And Barbara Streisand.
But it's still going to be better. But not that we're better than them, but this is going to be better.
Well, it's good to aim high. You have to shoot for the stars. Sort of the message from A Star is Born. But not really, but...
That's why you're here in Villa Arson, in residency to write. Mm-hmm. So you're often in the library.
We're on a writer's retreat. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
In America, you go to a cabin in the Maine.
Yeah.
But we're
exactly.
Now. Let's go to,
Well, we wanted a little sun, so we came here. Yeah.
Because it's a culture for you, musical.
Yeah, we love musicals.
Yeah. Well, I grew up watching musicals and
going to theater.
Yeah, going to the theater, and it's a big part of my upbringing. And
I didn't really go to the theater that much, but I saw a lot of, we all watched a lot of musicals. Musicals, they're great.
I mean, Singing in the Rain is...
It's weird that there's...
undeniable.
Every movie should be a musical.
Yeah, you think about it?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's crazy because it's since like 5 years in the movies, like you saw La La Land, and now even like the French cineast Jacques Audiard, he was kind of author cineast, in France, like a signature. The son of Michel Audiard, Jacques Audiard. His last movie is a mid musical,
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And
so you're saying they're coming back?
Yeah, a lot.
Oh, really? That makes sense. That's fine. We're not threatened by that. We don't think we invented the musical, or that we're just going to make a better musical, because ours is going to blow those musicals out of the water.
I think a little healthy competition is good for
Fuck those musicals. What
creativity.
Are they? What are they?
Yeah, it's
well,
huge.
listen, whoever made La La Land, we're coming for you. We're gonna smash you. We're gonna crush you. We're gonna destroy you with our musical.
I'm pretty sure it won like an Academy Award or an Oscar.
We don't care about your stupid awards. You degenerate sycophant. We're gonna crush you.
We reject award. We reject the award ceremony.
If some moron tried to give us one of those horrible awards, we'd smash them in the head with it.
We'd send someone in to make a statement.
We'd send it back.
Yeah.
Media mail.
If you had to play your last chord, what would it be? Major or minor?
Oh, major, definitely.
Well, I really love all the D chords, so maybe just a D major or a D7 are my favorite.
I like C. C is a great chord. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
All
I don't really.
Escape-ism songs are in major.
Yeah, they're all
keys.
major because I don't know how to play anything. No, I mean that's not why. I mean, but we're just simple. We want to make music like Gloria.
We want to make people happy.
Like the song Gloria, like a song everybody can cover. Anybody can cover our songs. They're just you need like 1 week of guitar training. We're not trying to prove anything to anybody. These are just simple folk songs. They can be passed down for centuries.
I think more people should cover Escape-ism songs.
Yeah, I think so too. It's weird that they don't.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's weird. Dolly Parton.
We should encourage it.
Dolly Parton.
To everyone listening now.
Yeah, you can cover.
You can cover our songs.
Well, no.
Oh.
Maybe only if you're really cool, you can cover Escape-ism. No, I'm joking. Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you a lot, Sandi and Ian and
Thanks.
Hugo.
Thanks, guys.